The names of the towns have been changed for safety reasons. My mom worked as a vendor back in the day, meaning she would go from store to store and order merchandise and fix the displays. Sometimes, when she had to do a complete makeover of the display, she would take me along to help. As a kid, this was awesome. My mom would let me skip school and I would go from store to store with her and help her out. And it meant we would get lunch at fast food restaurants, which almost we never did. She would get help and I would get chicken nuggets, so all in all, win-win. On the summer before I was to go into kindergarten, my mom had a massive display change for one of her products. The aisle had to be stripped completely down to bare shelves and new racking put up. She had done the few stores out of a town in the next town over. She had decided to ask for my help when she had to travel 2 towns over we commonly referred to as the Valley. At this time, there was a distinct difference between the 2 towns in the Valley. Warrington and Passington, now that they have merged into one town simply separated by a highway. So on this particular story happened in Passington, the smaller of the 2 towns in the Valley. We had just finished redoing the display, and we're heading over to the Warrington store when we passed this little farmhouse with old rickety sign out front that said antiques on it. My mom and I like to go antique shopping. She has a massive collection of cookie jars and blown glass vases, so we were always on the hunt for something she didn't have. We pulled over in what looked like a house turned into a shop. Pretty common in this area, so nothing strange about that. There were rows and rows of old bicycles out in front. A clawfoot cast iron bathtub that was home to a bunch of wild flowers. Wind chimes dangled from the corners of the home. Other oddities were in the lawn and stacked on the porch. The old porch creaked under our weight, its paint flaked off, showing old weathered boards. The screen door was missing its screen and the handle had been broken off and a brass doorknob stood in its place. My mom opened the door and a bell chimed. Not the prettiest of jingling of bells you would hear during Christmas, but a clunk, more like the noise of a wooden spoon in an old pan would make. The air was dusty and you could see it in the beams of light that barely passed through the dirty window. It smelled old like most antique shops did. Musty. This place was top to bottom full of stuff. Piles on top of piles. I don't think there was an empty space available in the whole approximately 1,500 square foot home. A lady popped up from behind the counter that separated what I can only assume was once the kitchen for the dining area. We stood in what was probably once the living room area. She was in her mid-60s, tiny but not frail. She looked like she had been a farmhand or something similar her whole life. Her arms were lean as she lifted a box onto the counter. It landed with a thwump. Her salt and pepper hair was tied up in a bun and she wore a green bandana around her neck. Otherwise, she fit the typical farmer look: flannel, overalls, work boots, and gloves. "Afternoon, ladies. Is there anything I can help you with?" she said in a cheery voice. "No, just browsing. We didn't even know that there was an antique shop out this way," my mom said. "Ah yes, this stuff goes back generations, mostly from my family, but from a few neighbors. They had been cleaning out their old barns and such and bringing me all that they find, mostly junk but a few good items. I barely have room for it all," she said, wiping the sweat off of her forehead with the back of her hand. "Just let me know if you find anything. Prices are negotiable. I'd rather it go to a good home than stay here and collect dust, you know?" And she went back to moving boxes. My mom and I carefully weaved in and out of the piles of stuff. I lost her somewhere in the mess. I was careful not to bump the piles in fear of getting buried in them, and went on my way down a hall where the bedrooms must have been. There were 2 doors that were closed with signs on the doors that said employees only, or do not enter, so I went on by. Walking further down the hallway, I found a bedroom filled with old military things. There were uniforms and ammo cans, wooden crates, and a glass case filled with old medals. A few bronze stars and a purple heart. There were other things I didn't know what they were, but I knew my dad would. Excited about what I found, I searched for my mom. She was in the kitchen area now looking at some old cookie jars. "Oh hey honey, do you remember if I had this one or not?" Holding up a duck. I don't think so. The only duck you have is the one with the sailor hat on. That one doesn't have a hat and he's holding an apple." "Well, I will add this to the pile then." "Mom, I found a whole room full of military stuff that Dad might like. Maybe we should bring him back here so he can see it." Most of that stuff was my granddad's. I don't know much about him other than he served in the military. Mom didn't talk much about him, the lady said. She went back to moving boxes around. I was starting to get bored. We must have been there for about an hour and I thought I had seen everything. I walked back down the hallway to go back into the room where the military gear was, hoping to find something to bring home to my dad. The hallway now ended in a doorway. I didn't remember there being a door there before. The mahogany-stained door was cracked just a little and there was a light streaming from it. No sign that said "do not enter," so I pushed on it. The heavy door made no noise when it opened. The room was overflowing with kids' toys, old dolls, trucks, blocks, and creepy stuffed animals. The light beamed through the solitary clean window in the whole home, illuminating that mobile that hung in the corner. The moon and the stars turned into circles as it spun around without anyone touching it. Its Pop Goes the Weasel song playing faintly. Mesmerized by the mobile, I walked towards the corner. There was an old yellow sheet over something large. I pulled it off. Dust filled the air and I choked back a cough. Underneath was a white wicker bassinet, in perfect condition, dressed in a tiny blanket. A hand-stitched teddy bear laying in it. For no reason at all, I had the urge to touch it. My stomach clenched and I reached out, running my fingers across the top. A flash of being underwater, bubbles swirling above my head. I heard screaming and crying. There was a face above me, but it was blurry, and I couldn't see it through the water. My eyes hurt and my lungs burned as I gasped for air. I lost my balance and grabbed the wicker. Its brittle bones crumbled in my hand and caused the bassinet to tumble to the ground with a loud thump. Choking, I tried to yell for my mom, but I couldn't breathe. Tears filled my eyes. "What are you doing in here?" the lady yelled at me. I couldn't reply. I was still trying to catch my breath. She died. Drowned," I managed to sputter. My mom rushed in and swooped me up, checking to make sure I was okay. Red in the face and crying, she held me in her arms. My head was on her shoulder. "What happened? Are you okay?" The baby died." "What baby? What are you talking about?" "Her mother killed her. She drowned. My sister. She trembled as the words escaped her lips. "My mother killed her when she was just a baby. In the tub, in this house. I was only a few years old and I couldn't save her." Her weathered face had gone pale. She looked me square in the eye. "How did you know that? Who are you?" "I think it's time to leave. I'm going to get her home. She's had a long day and probably needs a nap. I'm going to pass on the few items I set aside," my mom said as she walked to the large mahogany door. She struggled to open it with me in her arms. She sat me down and I turned to the lady. An overwhelming sadness rushed over me. And then it was just gone. I smiled and said, "Inel says it's okay, and she's happy now. She wants you to know that." The lady had the bear and was holding it to her chest. Tears ran down her face. Mom and I walked out of the room, down the hall, and the way out of the door. The bell rang with the thunk one last time. We got in the car and didn't talk the whole way home. A few days later, we ended up in the valley again. This time my dad came so he could help with the reface. Apparently I wasn't as helpful as I thought. "Hey Mom, why don't we go to that antique shop to see if that cookie jar is still there?" "Well, we have to drive right by it to get to the store. I don't see why not." We drove down the road and stopped. There was a driveway and a big empty spot where the house should have been. "Doesn't look like much of a shop," my dad said, trying to make light of the moment. "That can't be right. It was here. It was a big house right there." My mom got out of the car and walked right up to where the house should have been. She scuffled around, looking for evidence to prove she wasn't crazy. She kicked over a piece of cardboard. A brown, dirty teddy bear was on the ground. She picked it up, looked at me. Slowly and carefully, she set it down upright back where she found it. I haven't seen my mom flustered too many times in my life. She scurried back to the car, clicked on her seatbelt, and hightailed it out of the lot. And we never went back.